All right, we kind of touched on it last time. Last video, we were talking about motor unit recruitment and why it's important for muscle growth. Now we know that our brain is sending signals to our muscles so we can contract under high degrees of resistance. How can we maximize the amount of muscle that we're growing from a scientific standpoint, right? How can we maximize muscle growth? Let me write that down. That's today's question. How is muscle built? In this video, we'll cover, let me go over this. Training styles, training methods we'll talk about. We'll also talk about, how muscle is built. So how is muscle actually built is today's topic. We're gonna be talking about training methods. We're gonna be talking about the science behind it. Let me draw a big old muscle. So what is a muscle? That's a muscle. A muscle is made out of fibers, right? There are lots of microfibers inside the muscle, right? It goes whoop, whoop. These are the tendons down here. So I guess I'll draw the diagram, right? I'll draw a little diagram. Let me get a red marker. I have a red marker around here somewhere. Hold on. Oh my gosh, a red marker just appeared out of nowhere. What the heck? No way. I guess I'm not losing my mind, guys. We're gonna draw muscle fibers like this. These are your muscle fibers. I guess I'll make the tendon blue. Blue tendon. There's not really a reason it's blue. It's just trying to show some difference. Okay, cool. Now that I have muscle fibers and tendons on the diagram, when it comes down to stimulating more muscle growth or building up more muscle, everyone thinks, or everyone used to think, I think people are kind of coming around nowadays. The common method that people thought was micro tears. So the tears in the muscle fibers is what was causing new muscle growth. You'll hear people say, oh, I'm trying to break down my muscle fibers so I can build them up stronger. And as we know now, that's false. So muscle damage, I'll write this down. Muscle damage does not equal hypertrophy. Ooh, that's a good word for you guys, hypertrophy. Do you guys know what hypertrophy is? Hypertrophy is just building muscle. That's what hypertrophy is. Some people will pronounce it hypertrophy. These people are incorrect. Do not pronounce it hypertrophy, it's hypertrophy. I'm nitpicky about this. And yes, this will be on the test, so make sure you guys are taking notes. We know that muscle damage does not equal hypertrophy. You can think of this as muscle fibers being parts in a car, right? If you were to go ahead and crash your car, say, but you replace the broken parts of your car with the same exact parts that you had before, you didn't really beef up your car. Your car is the same exact car as before. And that's kind of what muscle damage does, right? So if I'm training in the gym with intensity, muscle damage is going to occur. I'm going to damage the fibers in my muscle and they're going to repair themselves. But if you damage the muscle tissue, what's happening is you're just going to have to repair those muscle tissues to build them back up to where they were. That's why doing high degrees of muscle damage with excessive amounts of intensity or absurd amounts of volume, you're going to be causing a lot of muscle damage, which then your body has to recover from. It takes time, it takes energy to recover from muscle damage, and you're not going to get a whole lot of hypertrophy out of it. So what actually grows muscle then? The involuntary slowing, and this is important too. So the fact that it's involuntary means that you're not consciously slowing down your tempo. You're not slowing down the amount of force production going to the muscle. You're not reducing the motor unit recruitment. You're just pushing as hard as you can or pulling as hard as you can and nothing's moving. That's basically what we're saying with the involuntary slowing of the contraction, right? So the way that muscle is actually built is through the involuntary slowing of the contractile phase. So like I kind of mentioned in the last video, when we're squeezing with high amounts of motor unit recruitment, which we explained in the last video, we are then going to get closer to that involuntary slowing. Now, what happens when we get to that involuntary slowing? We don't actually know. I'm just kidding, we do actually know. What's happening is there's something called actin and myosin, and these actin and myosin, they pull apart on each other, right? They're kind of like two big long worms that are pulling and contracting against each other. And in the midst of that, there's a protein called titin. When it is lengthened and contracted with high degrees of mechanical tension, which is another word we'll talk about, when titin is exposed to high degrees of mechanical tension, it then signals to stimulate new muscle growth. And it's that signaling that is what's going to grow more muscle tissue when you recover, eat your protein, and get to sleep. Now that we know that we need to get to the involuntary slowing of the contraction, well, why don't we just start 1 rep maxing, right? Why don't we start just doing you know, super heavy lifting. If heavy lifting is the only way to build muscle, why don't we just train like that? And there's a couple of reasons, right? The first is that it's easy to get injured, right? If you're training with high amounts of weight constantly, your body is not going to be able to recover very quickly. You could potentially tear your tendons off the bone, and then your muscle will contract and stay contracted because there's nothing to pull it to the bone. Not a good idea, right? Training with high loads all the time is not safe. So what we can do to then build muscle effectively, and we know that muscle damage does not equal hypertrophy, we want to find the sweet spot, right? So we want to find stable environments. We want to find high amounts of motor unit recruitment, so that way we can then generate the involuntary slowing of the contraction. And the best way to do this is the 6 to 8 rep range. Now, this is not magic. This is not like if you're not doing 6 to 8 reps, oh, you're not gonna be optimal, right? But if you're in the 6 to 8 rep range, you can pretty much guarantee that you're getting the best of both worlds. You're minimizing the amount of muscle damage that's going to happen to your muscles, because muscle damage is accumulated through multiple contractions over and over and over again when it comes to mechanical and passive tension that the muscle's being exposed to. So you're minimizing the amount of muscle damage you're getting while maximizing getting to that involuntary slowing of the contraction. And what I mean by this is, at the 6th rep, you should be barely able to contract your muscles, pushing as hard as you can. At the 8th rep, you should probably getting to the point where you cannot finish. And that's why it's a rep range. If you fail at 6, it's perfectly fine. If you fail at 8, it's also perfectly fine. But if you're getting 9, if you're getting 10 reps, you're still gonna see growth, but you're also going to be more at risk for accumulating more muscle damage as well, which is not a bad thing by any means, right? It's okay to get some muscle damage on occasion. If you want to be as efficient as possible when it comes to building muscle, sticking within this rep range is going to help you be more optimal when it comes to building muscle effectively. Now, obviously you need to pair this with a good diet, good recovery program, so where you're actively resting and building back the tissue that you not only damaged, but then stimulating new growth and building that new tissue as well. If you're training in the 6 to 8 rep range, you're pretty much golden when you're training with effective, high intensity, low volume style of training. But this isn't the only method, right? There are other training methods. How else can we grow muscle? All right, so let's talk about training methods real quick. So when it comes to training methods, people have different ideologies of how you can get to the involuntary slowing of the contraction, right? And some people will argue that you don't necessarily just need that. And the reason for that is because studies have shown that you can see adequate growth from what's called an isometric hold. We first need to talk about mechanical tension and passive tension. Mechanical tension is the force acted upon the contractile phase of the movement, and passive tension is the force being acted upon our muscle during the descent, right? Or the eccentric phase. The reason why passive tension is not as good as mechanical tension when it comes to stimulating new muscle growth is because passive tension, your muscles have a lot more strength when it comes to lowering the weight. You're stronger in that eccentric phase, whereas it is a lot more difficult for your muscles to generate mechanical tension, thereby getting you closer to the involuntary slowing, thereby signaling more muscle growth. So when we talk about training methods, we want methods that are going to maximize the amount of mechanical tension while still giving us a good amount of passive tension, but not wasting our entire rep on a slow eccentric so we don't generate a ton of muscle damage. The longer that we're under mechanical and passive tension, the more muscle tears that we get on our muscle fibers, right? More muscle fiber tears we get, and this means that we have to recover. So if we can just get in under heavy loads, get to that 6th rep and start to fail, we can then see the involuntary slowing and then signal for more growth without having to have a ton of muscle damage. This doesn't mean it's the only way though. You still can see growth upwards of 8 reps. You can build muscle, like I've said in my other videos, as low as 5 reps and as high as 30 reps. But ideally, if you want to optimize how to build muscle, the 6 to 8 rep range is going to be the best training method when it comes to building muscle. Now, when we're talking about stability is going to be a huge role in any kind of training environment. You need to feel stable, because if you're not stable, your brain, I don't know, I took my pen out, I wasn't gonna draw a brain or anything, but your brain signals to your muscle to then activate more motor units, right? More motor unit recruitment means that you can contract more fibers. If you're not contracting all your fibers, you're not going to be signaling as much growth. All right, that's gonna be it for how muscles built. We went over the training methods and the science behind the muscles, the tendons, and how everything comes together to start building more muscle. If you guys like this video, make sure you guys leave a like. We also have more information just like this inside of our SweatSphere school community, so make sure you join that. Link is in the description. But anyway, my name is Josh. Hope you guys like this video, and I will see you guys inside the SweatSphere.